Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're back continuing the tank comparison series of videos we've been making. Once again, comparing all 6 tanks that I've been playing concurrently on live streams on the Battle for Azeroth beta, a couple days a week. So if you haven't tuned into those, I definitely recommend it. But for now, what we're going to talk about is the summary of this week's developments and knowledge and all that I've learned about the tanks this week and my position on them. And this has actually been a very, very big week. I think this might have been the biggest week, not only for stuff that I've learned, but also for stuff that might have changed. It's actually a pretty big deal because there was a lot of buffs, not necessarily buffs, nerfs, whatever, like a lot of changes to classes, not necessarily design stuff like you might expect now at this point. It's more tuning. And it did have a very big impact on some tank classes. But we also learned a couple very interesting things as well along the way. So we are going to talk about that. But just a reminder, the reason we're doing this is because I'm trying to get enough knowledge to make a massive, gigantic tank comparison video in which we compare and contrast all 6 tanks from every possible angle in Battle for Azeroth. And we did this in Legion, one of the most successful channels on the, or videos on the channel. And I want to make sure that I'm even more informed this time so we could have a better discussion on such. So we're getting close to that. I'd say we're well over halfway there, and you know, there's only a couple weeks left here before the pre-patch comes out. So I think, yeah, we're getting close. So anyway, we'll start, of course, with Blood Death Knight. Now, I do have some things that I want to read out from Wowhead, okay? If you guys haven't been following, there's been a couple big patch developments for some specs, classes, etc. And Blood DK is certainly one of them. Now, there's also another patch that's supposed to come soon. It might come Monday, I'm not sure, but yeah, it was. I don't know how people have access to this information. I guess it's posted somewhere. I'm not sure, but it's not actually on the live servers yet. But in that, it has a 10% flat HP buff across the board for Blood Death Knight, baked into the Veteran of the Third War passive. Okay, that's not in the game yet. But if it was in the game, it would be very, very, very noticeable. Very nice. Blood DK is already very strong right now. I feel like their self-healing is extremely strong. And even though with this, what I'm about to read, these nerfs, I still think they're in a great position. So basically, the first thing there's only really 2 things they did here. Death Strike has been nerfed pretty substantially, okay? Focuses dark power, blah, blah, blah. Heals you for 25% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds, down from 30. Now on live, it's 20, but don't forget you have all of these, you know, traits and stuff that make Death Strike even stronger. So it's still better than it was in Legion, realistically, you know, minus the traits. I don't know. It's hard to calculate those in. But yeah, this was a massive, massive nerf to Blood Death Knight. And it's going to really matter more in raids than it will in 5-man. So we haven't really been able to see this. And then a minimum of 7% maximum health. So currently on live, it's 10% maximum health. There's this famous integration with the legendary wrists, where as long as Death Strike heals for 10% of your health, you get some extra off it. So as long as you have 1 point in versatility, it'll always happen. But yeah, you know, that might not happen now with the change to Death Strike here. So people in the pre-patch, maybe you might see that. But regardless, 7% down from 10 is... I don't really know how to feel about this. I talked about this in the guild and live while we were like live streaming during the weekend. And I don't know what the bigger deal is. I don't know if the maximum is the bigger deal, or... I don't know. But either way, it's a sizable nerf. I guess, you know, like realistically, while you're actually tanking a boss, the maximum, the 7% minimum, or whatever, like the minimum heal being 7% of your maximum health, it's not really going to apply. But it does, you know, it's probably going to apply in 5-man. There's a lot of times where you're death striking just for DPS, and you're getting a lot less HPS now out of that. But to kind of compensate for that, I guess is really the only way you could describe it. To compensate for that, they buffed the mastery, and it's not an insignificant buff. It's basically, it's bringing mastery and death strike a lot closer together. So if you watched last week's live stream, so not like the week that just passed, but the previous week, so the previous video's discussion, we saw insane amount of our healing from death strike. Like I'm talking like 40 to 60% on every type of content. And I think that's a bit absurd. So I do like that they're effectively trying to bring them two closer together again, like they more so were in WoD and even MoP. But it's still not quite there. It's getting better. But anyway, it's now 16% of the base amount healed as a physical damage absorb, up from 12%. So I'm satisfied with that. It's a concession, just like you're going to see on Demon Hunter, which we'll talk about here in a bit. A buff and a nerf at the same time. So I think this is good. I would like to see Blood Shield be a higher percentage of my healing for sure. But either way, it really hasn't actually changed the way I'm playing this character. He is overgeared for what he's doing, so it's not that big of a deal. Maybe that could be part of it, but regardless, I'm still doing a lot of healing. Definitely not topping the HPS as easily as I used to be, but still, Blood DK, obviously, niche is going to be their healing. And even, only 25% of the damage taken, if you get hit for like, 10 million equivalent, whatever it is now with the new squish, 10 million equivalent, you're obviously going to heal a massive amount in the next global, and that's what's always drawn me to Blood. So, yeah, so this week we haven't really, nothing's really happened in game. We did do some more testing. Hopefully you guys have seen that. They changed the artifacts, the Azurite traits, that is. They changed those around a bit, and so we acquired some new ones. We had some old ones in our bag that had traits on them. We tested Dancing Rune Weapon's Eternal Rune Weapon modifier again. It still stacks just like it did in previous builds, so that's very exciting. And then we tested the Marrow Rend one, Bones of the Damned, I believe it's called, and that does not appear to have any type of synergy or stack or anything like that. So that's kind of disappointing. I don't really know what to think about that. I have a whole thread on the beta class forums about this, and hopefully we get some answers, because there's some more stuff that we're going to talk about here in a second. But anyway, we'll move on to Demon Hunter now. Demon Hunter, again, it's still very capable of being the best tank outright in 5-mans. In fact, at this point, I would have to say it is the best tank outright in 5-mans. First of all, it does way too much damage. Like, I am hyper undergeared. It's to the point now where this is my least geared character somehow. Just got unlucky, basically, but it's only like 298 or something like that, and it is doing way more damage than everybody I play with, right? So, whatever you want to think about that, you can, but I think if you see like a 330 plus a 340 Demon Hunter, you're going to see them be easily the top DPS on all AoE. So I don't know how you could think that's good. I just think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's what's intended. I think it will get nerfed. Maybe not. People have been talking about the possibility that, making Demon Hunter the DPS tank is actually a way of balancing them, and that could be their niche. And then with that in mind, a lot of people are saying that they're exceedingly weak in raids, that their mitigation model is going to be very flimsy in raids. And I think we're kind of seeing a little bit of an adjustment with that in mind here in these patch notes for Demon Hunter. So this week, pretty sizable debuff, or whatever, nerf to demon spikes. It's changed from like whatever the formula used to be, 100 times agility divided by 100. So whatever. But now it's 85 times agility divided by 100. So effectively 80% of your agility. So that's a pretty big nerf, and it's going to get, that's a nerf that gets progressively nerfier. Anyway, it's getting worse over time, right? I guess so. Demon Spikes is still pretty much their only defensive ability. I mean, they have meta, and they have whatever the Fellbrand thing is, but yeah, this is really their active mitigation and their main form of mitigation for sure. But at the same time, they do a lot of self-healing, and they also got a buff to their passive armor. So a 10% increase to their passive armor from their Demonic Wards passive, just like we talked about with Blood DK, Veteran of the Third War. Similar here with Demonic Wards. And I think that will probably make up for the difference. But the reason that this is substantial is because so this is how it was working before, right? I'd pull like, so we did this last week, right? I pulled like 15, 20 mobs, ran in there, go full man mode, pop demon strikes, demon spikes, untouchable, and then the second it drops, I get deleted. Like literally got one shot. So like in one global, I died. So I think they're trying to, demon spikes was way too strong. It was better than 2 or 3 stacks of the bear equivalent, and obviously that requires a lot more resources than just demon spikes. So it was way too strong. It's probably in a better place now. But still, Demon Hunter, clearly the favorite for 5-mans. They have the best utility kit without any question. Unbelievable utility. And they still have, of course, an incredible amount of defense and offense. So, I don't know. I would be surprised to see them go live in this state. There's something else that was mentioned here. Circle of Binding, afflicting an enemy with sigils. Reduces the cooldown of your other sigils. I don't know if that was a naming thing, but I have been trying to test this. This is one that I haven't been able to test yet. I think that one is going to be a pretty interesting one. It's called Cycle of Binding. It basically, like I just described, whenever you use a sigil, your other sigils
You know, I guess all sigils now or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, the sigils cooldown is lowered. So you're basically just spamming sigils. I'm doing it all the time in 5-mans. And I don't know if I necessarily love it. It's kind of weird playing that way. But it's probably the best one for 5-mans outright. So I haven't been able to see if they stack. We'll talk about a little bit more about why I think they might. But regardless, if they do, that's going to be crazy. You're just going to constantly be throwing sigils down. So anyway, Paladin is the first revelatory one. I don't believe there was any Paladin changes this week. Let's just take a look. Oh, actually, no, that's not actually true. There definitely was a Paladin change. Let's see. Maybe not. There was something about the horse. Yeah, there we go. Divine Steed, okay? Leap atop your charger, blah, blah, blah. Increases movement speed by 100%. Cooldown change from 1 minute to 45 seconds. So that's a pretty big deal, right? One of the biggest problems I have with Paladin, you know, if you've been watching these videos, you'll know that I've been basically saying if they combine Paladin and Warrior together, it would be my favorite tank. And that is because I absolutely do not like Prop Paladin's physical mitigation model. It's tied to offense way too heavily, and I dislike that a lot. But I love their self-healing, and I love the way they do damage. But I hate their mobility, and their utility is not very good in my book. I think they are the worst utility tank, and we've talked about this at length, so I'm not going to bring it up again. But regardless, you know, Warrior kind of does the opposite of that. So today we got one step closer on 2 different fronts, and one of them is Divine Steed now being a 45-second recharge. So obviously you can get 2 charges with the talent there, and that is going to give you a lot more mobility on average throughout the dungeon, and that's very, very good, very healthy for the spec. Now, the other thing, this is probably one of the biggest things, and I might sound like an idiot talking about this, okay? But, and I don't know if this was because of the changes to, so what we're going to be talking about here is Flash of Light, all right? I've been testing this a lot on the beta, and there was a buff to Flash of Light. Expends a large amount of mana, blah, blah, blah. It's a heal for 125% of spell power, up from 125, or 120. So it's like, you know, a buff for Holy Paladins. And I don't know if that applies. It seems to for prod as well. Like, it's on the list for prod as well. So Flash of Light has been buffed. Now, I don't know like what to think about that regardless. But I was using it as a tank, and it heals for a lot. Like, I don't know. I've not directly compared it to Legion. But I think it's a lot more than Legion, okay? And all it does is cost mana, which you don't use for anything as a prop paladin, effectively. So then I went into combat and was testing it, and it doesn't seem like spell pushback's like a thing anymore. It seems like there's like maybe like a maximum, a really low maximum. Like you can get pushback like maybe 10% of the cast or something like that. So I'm sitting there getting hit by mobs, and I'm spamming Flash of Light, healing up the damage they're doing to me. Now this is of course in heroics. It's not in, you know, raids or mythic plus or something. It's probably going to get, you know, more dangerous because, you know, when you're casting the spell, you can't block or dodge or parry or any of that stuff. I assume it's still that way. I don't believe it's changed. But that's pretty interesting to me. The fact that I was able to literally just heal through the damage. Now, I could only get like 4 or 5 casts off because then I'd be completely out of mana. But I also have other heals, right? Like, you know, I got Judgment of Light on a talent, and of course I have Light of the Martyr plus the talent, all that. So Prop Pally has extremely good self-healing. And it's to the point where if this stays this way, if Flash of Light can continually be cast while in combat without any massive detriment and heals for as much as it does, Prop Pally might be like the best self-healing tank in the game. They might even be better in Blood, because I'm talking about, if you watch the stream, I am actually out-healing the healer easily just by casting Flash of Light on myself. It's healing like 15% of my health every cast, and it can crit too. The crits were huge. I sometimes got, yeah, a really big heal out of this. And you could heal the group with this, right? So one of the big problems with their utility is that it's been nerfed to the ground, you know, without the relics and the helm and all the strength that you got from Light of the Martyr, or whatever it's called, Light of the Protector. It's a lot harder to heal the group with this. But if I could just stand there and spam Flash of Light on them as well, it's interesting. So I don't know. I'd be very interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And I think, you know, conventional wisdom, when you hear somebody say this, it's like, wow, that guy's a noob. But I'm telling you, if you watch the stream, it was sizable. It was a sizable amount of healing. And even though I wasn't able to block or parry or dodge or whatever, I was out healing the damage with it. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that, but yeah, very interesting. Another one small thing I want to bring up is, if you guys have been paying attention, they actually changed all the utility Azerite armor traits to go to the inside row now, the third row of the trait. So previously all like the class specific stuff was on the outer row, and this was including utility. We made a big problem out of this in the Q&A when they said you're not going to be able to change gear, effectively completely making the utility ones useless because nobody's ever going to take a utility one over a DPS one. Well, guess what? I guess they listened, because they put the utility ones in the center row. So now it's between utility and defense only, not damage. Now imagine if they did that with legendaries, right? Where you could have Pridas on, but still have your DPS ones on. That's pretty much how powerful that is. And one of them is that Steed charge one, whatever it's called, where you give a bunch of speed to everyone else. We talked about it this weekend. Somebody said that it's only 8 yards. It only works 8 yards around the character, which is terrible. Even Stampeding Roar is 15 yards. So 8 yards is really bad. If that does stay that way, I'm not sure how strong that's going to be, but it's something to keep in mind. You can now get 3 stacks of that, giving a ton of speed to the group, and not have to choose between that and, say, offense or, like major other ones that are affecting your class. So, yeah. Adding spec-specific ones to the center row is very cool. Okay, so we'll move on to Warrior now. Warrior is probably the second most revelatory tank this week, and it's because I finally got to test the, I can't remember what it's called now. It's the Thunderclap Relic, or whatever, Azerite trait. Thunderclap Azerite trait, something, Crashing Thunder, something like that. Very, very, very interesting one. Okay, I'm going to detail exactly what happened. But on top of that, they got some very big changes, okay? Now, I'm not 100... For some reason, I can't seem to tie down exactly what happened here. But I will tell you this. Ignore Pain got a slight buff, okay? And they changed the mastery. All right, I'm going to read out what it says here. Increases your critical block, blah, blah, blah. None of that has changed. What used to read, though, was gaining twice your block value by 12%. Okay? So that has been... whatever. Increases your chance to critically block, which is gaining twice your block value by 12%. Okay? Now, it's blocking twice the amount by 12%. Okay? So apparently what that's done is it's kind of like added a fixture to the mastery where you're going to regularly get more critical block without needing the mastery stat. I think that's what it does. Gaining twice your block value or blocking twice the amount. Right. So it's not actually dependent on the mastery so much as the block stat overall. Okay. So this is a big buff from what I could tell, but that's not even the biggest buff. Now, this is not documented very well, but they also changed how block works entirely. So this is also somewhat relevant to Paladins, although certainly less than Warriors. They changed block to no longer give a percentage armor increase, right? So you'd raise your shield and block a spell, and you would get armor, or not a spell, obviously, an attack, and you'd get armor to mitigate that. That's how they did it. But it doesn't seem to work that way anymore in BFA. Now it seems to just flat out block like a certain percentage of the damage, okay? It's not armor based. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but apparently armor has a pretty steep diminishing return. So if you already have a lot of armor on your gear, block becomes less effective. That's no longer the case. And I don't know what's more important about all this, but these 3 things together have turned Prot Warrior from being, without question, the worst physical mitigator in the game to potentially the best. Like, I'm talking about untouchable. You know what I mean? I'm not even taking damage. I don't even need to use mitigation at all. Kind of like how Bear was, right? So that's a big deal. But the bigger deal is actually what I've tested with this clapping thunder or rolling thunder or eating thunder, whatever it's called. I can never remember. So what it does is every time you T-clap, that's short for thunderclap in case you're new, T-clapping increases the duration of an already active demo roar. That's short for demoralizing shout, okay? It's not called roar. But anyway, it's going to increase it by 1 second for every T-clap. Now, that synergizes really heavily with a talent that Warrior has that when you have Avatar up, it halves the duration of T-clap. And then, of course, T-Clap is heavily affected. The CD of it is heavily affected by haste. So Into the Fray plus high haste on gear is going to make T-Clap like pretty much like maybe a second and a half. Just spamming them. You're clapping like that. It's just crazy, right? So we tested it with one last week. One stack of it. Now we have 2 stacks of it on our gear. And it does increase by 2 seconds. So that's a really, really, really big deal because we tested Bear last week and it did not increase by 2 seconds. A similar ability, similar Azurite trait that Bear had. Warrior does increase by 2 seconds, but only on single target. What? So we tested it on the group of dummies where there's the 4 dummies, right? So Harry and 4 of his friends from England. So we tested it on those 4 dummies. We T-clapped and it only increased it by 1 second. So I was thinking maybe it was like randomly assigning the extra second to some different ones. We tested it a bunch. Didn't seem to happen that way. So I don't know what to say about that. I don't know if they know what to say about that. There is some very weird inconsistencies going on. So in fact, I have the thread in the description. I'm going to put it in the description. I would really appreciate your guys' discussion in this thread because I have no idea what's going on with stacking of Azurite traits. It was touted in the April Q&A as one of the biggest elements of the Azurite trait idea, and some of them stack like we saw with Death Knight, and some of them don't. Some of them have huge talent synergy like we saw with the Bear. Some of them don't. It just seems to be completely weird. And now that we've seen this on Warrior where on a single target it stacks 2 seconds with 2 stacks, but on multiple targets, at least we've only tested it with 4 targets, 4 training dummies. Like I said, there might be some kind of weird thing going on with the training dummy. It still increases it by 1 second though, so I don't know what kind of weird stuff could be going on there. I just don't know what to think about that. That is a very weird thing, and I think that might be one of the biggest revelations we've had, is that this Azurite trade system could be one of the coolest things that has ever been in the game, but we have to learn how it works. You have to tell us, Blizzard, okay? So anyway, after that, really didn't get much. There wasn't much learned on Druid, but I do want to use this as an opportunity to talk about a couple nerfs to Druid. All right, let me see if I can find them. So last week we were talking about how a lot of their damage was passive. A lot of it was coming from Brambles. And then, you know, lo and behold, this week, massive, massive nerf to both Brambles and Moonfire damage for Guardian Druids. Now, Moonfire was nerfed. It's alright. It's not the biggest nerf because it's more of a nerf for the other specs, but it is a nerf for Guardian as well. And then Brambles has been gutted. Like, I'm talking about ripped in half, okay? Sharp Brambles protect you, absorbing 0.06 times attack power. It used to be 0.2. So that is what? A 759% decrease, right? Just an absurd number. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, yeah, that's a huge, huge DPS loss. And a lot of people are concerned that that's going to kill their damage, as their damage was already pretty weak. But it's kind of just taken Brambles from the top DPS to kind of like middle of the pack. It still does pretty good damage, and it still absorbs a lot. It's actually pretty good. And the active portion of it hasn't been changed, so that's pretty good. That was a big part of it as well. So yeah, obviously, Brambles was way too overpowered as it was. No surprise that it's been changed. But yeah, regardless, I don't really think this is going to affect them in any way. It's not going to affect their damage. It really isn't. You're just going to do more damage with other spells now. It was doing way too much as it was. But another big nerf was Frenzied Regen. Now heals you for 24% of your maximum health over 3 seconds instead of 30% over 4. So that is a huge nerf. Huge nerf. And, you know, Bear is still extremely physically defensive, but their healing is getting worse and worse. And now that we know effectively you cannot stack the Gory Regeneration trait, we've been testing this about 2 weeks now. I had 1 stack. It does have insane synergy with Incarnation though. If you pop Incarnation and then Mangle and it hits 3 targets, it will increase 3 seconds for Gory Regen, effectively being able to keep up Frenzied Regen for like a minute at a time. It's really crazy. But the problem is it has absolutely no use on bosses because the global's a second and a half, and it only is going to increase it when, unless there's a boss that has 3 targets constantly. Incarnation is terrible. And without Incarnation, you're losing your top DPS in Moonfire. It's a lot harder to keep Moonfire up without Galactic Guardian. So I think this is a really bad thing for Druid overall. I think it's going to hurt them. And frankly, they weren't in a great place as it was. So I don't know. I'm not in love with that. But Frenzied Regen, it's all because of the Azerite trait. They just need to clarify why this isn't stacking, how we are meant to use it. And if you can stack it, then this nerf is totally understandable. But otherwise, basically, Frenzied Regen is only going to ever be good in AoE situations. Or, I guess, I don't know. It has some uses in 5-mans and raids in general with single target. But, I don't know. It's just an unfortunate thing. So, yeah, anyway. That's pretty much it for Bear. But I did want to take a moment to talk about... well, let's wait till the end, actually. Okay, so we'll go to Brewmaster. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Brewmaster, I don't know. It's just not catching me. I had a discussion last week in the comments and in Discord about Monk, about how I was a little bit confused about some of their stuff, and the more I think about it, the less interested I am in it. But they did get some changes. Again, the guard, where is that? What they got? That guard got buffed. Maybe not. I don't see it on the list there. Well, I don't know. I could have swore it was on the list. Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. Okay. Anyway, so guard got buffed to attack power times 5. Now it's attack power times 7.5, and then they changed the wording on it. So, I mean, it is a buff, whatever. But, yeah, the reason I was so interested in Brewmaster was because of some of their Azerite traits. And I thought it was going to synergize really well with the talent Spitfire. But then, Morgraine, good friend of mine, if you're watching this. Anyway, so, yeah, he told me that Spitfire isn't really going to help that trait, or that, yeah, Azerite trait, because... It's more, you get more value out of the ticks of Breath of Fire, not the actual hit of Breath of Fire. And he said that every time you use Breath of Fire, it's just going to restart. So like if you're in between a tick, you're going to just delay the next tick. So effectively, you're not gaining anything by using it frequently. And it's not even being used that frequently. So that talent is not fun at all. But I don't know. I'll say this. Monks are in a great position. If you're worried about threat at all, they are going to be the best tank for threat because they have the strongest utility in the threat mindset. Them and Blood DK are effectively going to be the best threat holders because they have more access to these threat generating mechanics. And, you know, Blood DK has 2 taunts. Brewmaster has a statue. You throw it down, you taunt the statue, and all of the mobs, they go attack you, okay? So that's a pretty big deal. So I think Brewmaster has a good place in 5-mans, and I would be reluctant to say that they would be better than the second best, or the second worst tank, that is, sorry, just because their mitigation model has been disconnected from the server. Now we get to take a look at the amazing background on the launch. But anyway, yeah, the mitigation model is just pretty weak. I'm not a big fan of it, honestly. It's just doesn't really work for 5-mans, and I don't think it's ever really going to. Like, no matter what you do, they just don't have the self-healing. But the Azerite traits are giving them more access to self-healing, more access to things that might be useful for 5-man. So the jury's out. I haven't really been able to test that, but at this very moment, I don't really have any more interest in Brewmaster. So I probably won't get it to 120 just because I don't really have a ton of time. But that's that. So again, so last week we ranked him, kind of a preliminary ranking on the strength. We talked about that, not wanting to do that, but regardless. If I had to pick my favorite tanks, I would say right now Blood DK number 1 without question, Bear number 2 pretty comfortably, and then after that these, like, so tier 1 number 1 Blood, tier 2 number 1 Druid, and then tier 3 number 1, and I don't know, these 3 are all really good. They would all be on tier 3. I don't know. Demon Hunter's okay because of mobility, Paladin's crazy because of self-healing, and Warrior's awesome because of the utility. So like, I like all 3 of these tanks. They're all good, and I could see myself playing them. And then you got Brewmaster, kind of just on the outside looking in. Don't really like any of the specs of Monk. But one thing that I do want to do, and what we're going to start doing this coming week, is I'm going to start testing healers, okay? So I already have a Druid and a Paladin at 120, and then I have a Disc Priest that I'm going to mess around with a bit as well. And the reason I want to test healers is not to learn healers, but to learn more about tanks. Now, I feel like one of the best ways to learn about tanks is to watch how other people tank and to see how they're adapting to the situations. Because we've talked about this in the past, you know, like, even though the tanks are different, like Paladin mitigates differently than Blood DK, mitigates differently than Druid, etc., I know how I'm going to approach the situation. I'm going to use this type of ability here, this type of self-heal here, etc. But there might be better ways to approach it. So the best way for me to learn is to watch it happen in front of my eyes, and as the healer, react to their either, you know, faults or successes. And we'll see. So I think this coming week, I probably, maybe like 2 streams are going to be just pure healing. I'm just going to heal on Druid. Maybe I'm going to add Shaman too. I really like Shaman. But yeah, probably Druid, Disc Priest, Paladin, maybe Shaman. I don't know. We'll see. But the Paladin is ready for Heroics. It's actually quite geared. That's not the Paladin, but the Paladin is actually quite geared. The problem is you don't have an intellect weapon or intellect talent or trinkets. So I don't know if that's going to be a problem, but I am going to give it a try. And it's just kind of to see more about tanking. So I really want to learn as much as I can about tanking, guys. I want to be able to say definitively how I feel about this without having any guesswork at all. And I think we're getting there, okay? So realistically, probably in about a month from now, that video is going to go live. It's going to be one of the biggest videos I've ever made, the longest videos I've ever made, the most info ever packed into a single video. It's probably going to take a week plus to make of constant editing, constant creation. So that one of those weeks I might not be able to stream at all. I am going on vacation probably when the pre-patch comes out, so that's unfortunate, but yeah, anyway, that's everything. So thanks for watching. If you guys have more that you want to talk about, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Paladin situation. Love to hear your thoughts on Thunderclap, the weird thing with Thunderclap, and, you know, whatever else you guys want to talk about is fine. So thanks for watching. We will see you guys in the next one.